All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're looking at a completely fascinating text from 2022 by Xu Feng, and the title itself is a real provocation. Instead of moral preaching, change the program. What we're unpacking today is a super radical argument about human behavior and how we design our society. The core idea is this: when people persistently do the wrong thing, or when a society is really suffering, our first instinct is usually to preach, right? We tell people to be better, to act more morally. But this text argues that this is fundamentally the wrong approach. It claims that rewriting our societal programs, our actual systems, is vastly superior to relying on moral preaching. Basically, it's an engineering approach to human morality.
Here's the roadmap for our explainer today. We're going to start with a wild historical puzzle, the convict ship dilemma, then unpack the core thesis of programs over preaching, see how this redesigns everyday life, scale it up to solving global crises, and finally, look at the ultimate vision. Okay, Section 1, the convict ship dilemma. The author grounds this whole radical theory in a very real, very gritty piece of 18th century British history. So, picture this. The British government is dealing with overcrowded prisons, so they hire private ship captains to transport convicts all the way to Australia. The result? An absolutely staggering 12% mortality rate. I mean, one ship alone lost 158 out of 424 people. Why? Well, because the government's program was literally just paying captains based on how many bodies they could cram on board before leaving port. These captains were driven by profit, right? So they packed these ships to the absolute brim. The air was foul, conditions were horrific, and honestly, because the captains already had their cash, they just didn't care if the convicts actually survived the trip. Now, you'd think the government would step in, right? And they did try. As the text notes, they tried to fix this nightmare with morals and rules. They sent government officials to supervise, they set up mandatory living standards, they even sent escorting doctors to care for the sick. But it totally failed. The greedy ship owners just bribed the doctors and the officials, and if some official actually had a strong moral compass and refused the bribe, no joke, the captains literally threw them overboard into the sea. The death rate stayed incredibly high because, fundamentally, the underlying incentive hadn't changed at all. But then we get this massive paradigm shift, and it is honestly incredibly simple. Look at the difference here. The old program paid based on the number of convicts boarded. The new program, it paid based on the number of convicts safely delivered to Australia. That's it. They didn't beg the captains to be more humane people. They just tweaked the structural incentives. Suddenly, a captain's selfish desire to make money perfectly aligned with keeping those convicts alive. And the results were just phenomenal. Almost overnight, captains started actively protecting the convicts. They started serving better food, cleaning the ships. Heck, they were the ones actively begging doctors to come on board to treat the sick now. The mortality rate absolutely plummeted from 12% down to a mere 1%. Not a single sermon was preached, you guys. Not a single moral was learned. But thousands of lives were saved just by changing the program. Which brings us right to Section 2, programs over preaching. The author takes this bit of maritime history and spins it into a massive philosophy about human society. The core thesis is summed up perfectly in this quote right from the text. If a certain state is persistently bad, then one should not rely on moral preaching to solve the problem. Instead, consider changing the program. Basically, the author is arguing that chronic human suffering, whether it's poverty, broken families, or societal decay, isn't a failure of our individual morality. It's a failure of the systems we're stuck operating within. When things are persistently terrible, preaching is just a waste of breath. You gotta rewrite the code. To really put this into perspective, think about elder care. For thousands of years, society has relied heavily on moral preaching, right? We teach filial piety. We urge kids to dutifully care for their aging parents. But the author claims this moral expectation has largely failed us, leaving tons of elderly people to suffer in misery. And trying to fix it with new versions of the same flawed system, like pensions or nursing homes, doesn't cut it. Changing the program means totally redesigning how society handles aging from the ground up, completely eliminating our reliance on guilt or duty. So, what does this actually look like in practice? Let's hit Section 3, Redesigning Everyday Life, where the author applies this program change to ingrained human traditions through Life in Chanyuan's second home mode. This is where the solutions get incredibly radical. Look at how they address traditional problems. Marital friction? The solution isn't couples therapy, it's literally abolishing marital relationships entirely. What about flawed parenting, where we accidentally pass down our own incomplete worldviews and traumas to our kids? The proposed fix is to completely separate children from their biological parents so they can be raised by perfect spiritual teachers instead. For the elderly, the second home mode guarantees a happy late life no matter what your wealth or family status is. Even modern, outrageously expensive funerals get a totally new proprietary funeral system to make departing graceful and affordable. Just to really hammer home how absolute this thinking is, check out this quote on marriage. In this mode, there are no marital relationships, and without marital relationships, the troubles and confusions caused by relationship management disappear. It's a totally wild perspective, right? According to the source, the pain of marriage isn't because we're bad communicators. It's because the program of marriage itself is flawed. Simply delete the program and boom, you instantly evaporate all the pain, jealousy, and confusion. You solve the problem by just removing the environment where the problem exists.
All right, moving on to section 4, solving global crises. Because the text doesn't stop at the family unit, it boldly scales this logic all the way up to the entire planet.
The author poses a great rhetorical question here. Can moral preaching solve floods, droughts, epidemics, or wars? Can we literally just preach our way out of extreme wealth disparity? The author's definitive conclusion is that we can't. Asking nations to play nice, or asking corporations to be less greedy, is exactly the same failed strategy as asking those 18th century ship captains to be more humane. It doesn't work. The global crises we face are just symptoms of a broken global program. So, the proposed systemic fix for the planet is a complete global redesign program. We're talking absolute global unification and the total disappearance of nations. The text argues that if interconnected people can move freely everywhere, the phrase they used is, "you are in me, I am in you," then the whole concept of warfare becomes logistically impossible. I mean, who would you even fight? By erasing borders, the need for military expenses completely vanishes, soldiers aren't needed, and destruction is eliminated. Again, the author insists this isn't about humans suddenly becoming morally pure angels. It's just about switching the operating system of the planet. Which brings us to our final part, section 5, the ultimate vision. To wrap up this explainer, we have to ask, who is actually going to push the button on this massive program update for humanity? The text concludes by asserting that this transformation requires a very specific leader. It introduces the deiform Buddha, the central figure of the Life Chain Yarn community. The source explicitly claims that, looking at all the outstanding figures in human history, only this specific entity has the ultimate capacity to truly lead civilization into this unified, program-driven utopia. It even goes so far as to state that this figure actually surpasses other prophesied saviors, like the Ziwei Saint. It's a really bold claim that anchors this entire sweeping structural philosophy to one singular, highly specific leadership vision. And that leaves us with a really profound question to chew on as we conclude this explainer today. Does human harmony require better morals or a completely rewritten program? From those brutal convict ships back in the 18th century all the way to the complexities of modern marriage and global warfare, this source challenges us to completely rethink our approach. Stop asking people to be better and start asking how we can build systems where being better is the only logical outcome. So what do you think? Are we wasting our time trying to fix the human heart when we really should be recoding the system entirely? It's definitely a fascinating perspective to leave you with today.